something in my tooth. The random word generator for today is deliver. Deliver. I have an idea of where I want to deliver this message, and I'm trying to think of different rhymes that work with deliver. But instead, I'm going to just stick with a story. So I have another quote. And this quote is less about what you say and how you deliver it. I have a story, actually. I was on my mission, and we have these things every couple of months called a zone conference. It's where all of the missionaries gather together, and it's usually in a church building. We're there with the mission president and all of the other missionaries. And oftentimes the zone conference entails having someone, you could say higher up, actually come meet, and they usually are like the highlight of the zone conference. And this time we actually had Apostle Holland, or Elder Holland, there at our zone conference. And I remember we were all sitting in these rows. He was up at the podium, and it was this smaller church, so it wasn't like a regular USA church, but it was more of it was an old church. We're all sitting in the audience, and Elder Holland gets up and he begins speaking. And he says, okay, do you see this before you guys? And he points down, and he has this rolling cart. This rolling cart has an apron that's draped over the rolling cart, and on the top of it, he has a piece of cake. Like, not a piece of cake, but an entire chocolate cake. It's a multi-layered chocolate cake. It's kind of like Matilda's chocolate cake, that cake that Bruce eats at the, in front of everyone. So he's got this rolling cart. It's got this apron. Good morning. He has this apron over it. He's got this big chocolate cake on it. And he looks out amongst all of us missionaries, and he says, okay, who would like a piece of chocolate cake? And of course, all the missionaries raise their hands. And so he kind of like looks throughout the audience, and he goes, you, right there. And he points to this big Tongan, this big Samoan guy, right? So the guy gets up, and he starts walking up towards this cake. And as he gets maybe 2 or 3, 4 feet from the rolling cart, Elder Holland looks at him, looks down at the cake, places his hands in it, grabs a giant piece of cake, and then throws it at this missionary. And it splats all over his white shirt, his tie. It's just disgusting, all over him. And then he looks at the missionary and he says, sit down. Go around and sit down. And all of us are just shocked. And so this missionary turns around and he goes back and he sits down in the audience. And afterwards, he kind of cleans off his hand and he looks around the audience and he says, okay, who would like a piece of cake now? And of course, no one raises their hand, right? And so he looks around and he chooses like the weakest, feeble little guy missionary out there. And he says, you, come on, come here. So this kind of missionary like timidly gets up, kind of like cautiously walks up, thinking he's just going to get hit with all this cake. Good morning. And as he's walking up, Elder Holland lifts up the apron below it, reaches under the rolling cart, pulls out a platter, like this, like marble plate, and it has this really, really fine silverware, and it has already. And so he takes from the same cake as the missionary's coming up. He cuts out a perfect piece of the cake, places it on the plate, puts the silverware on the plate, and then offers it up to the missionary. Would you like this piece of cake? And as he says this in such a gentle, inviting way, the missionary kind of like, okay, takes it, and then turns around and goes and sits back down in his seat. And Elder Holland then at that point goes up to the podium, and he stands there and he says, what was the difference between those two examples? The cake was the same. The recipe was the same. It was in the delivery that made all the difference. And he said, elders and sisters, brothers and sisters, oftentimes people cannot accept or listen or even be open and receptive to a message because of the way that it has been delivered. And going back to my quote, it's more about how you deliver it rather than what you say. You could be talking about truth, eternal, timeless, paradimensional, omnilogical truth. And yet if it is not delivered in the right way, it can fall on deaf ears. And I love that example because it was so visible and it was so disruptive that it painted a picture that I can still recall 13, 14, 15 years later. And that is, you might have a message, an idea, a product, something that you know will benefit the world and bring people happiness, ease, comfort, convenience. And yet it is just as much your responsibility to be able to market, promote, and deliver that idea, message, or product as effectively as possible. Because it's not about what you have or what you say, it's about how you deliver it. And that is my word for today. Deliver. Yes, deliver.